Hello, I'm Emma of Granola Gear, and I'm so excited you've just decided to join me to chat a little bit about patterns that I own but I haven't knit. I'm not a crazy pattern buyer, but I went through and I own 63 total patterns. We're talking purchase patterns. I'm not going to include like free patterns just because I don't know, downloading a bunch of those is less uh, I don't know what the word would be, but I don't feel as bad about it because it's free. But I haven't knit 9 of my purchase patterns. And I will preface all of this by saying I think every single one of these patterns is very beautiful and very well written. It has nothing to do with the content of the pattern. A lot of it actually has to do with me and my not swatching or not having the right yarn for something, or just kind of changing my mind partway through a knit and going in a different direction. So I'm including in this things that I may have started and unraveled and then just kind of abandoned the idea of the knitting the project entirely. So that's what this list is. I'm going to talk about each of the patterns a little bit and kind of like why I changed direction. Once again, all of these patterns are amazing. All of the designers did a great job. So beautiful. It's just a me thing. I'll start by saying that this is cami number 7 by My Favorite Things Knitwear, knit in an unraveled sweater yarn that is 100% linen. I love this. I love the piece. I think it is a beautiful knit. And I just want to say that so I don't get lots of comments asking. I'll start with accessories that I have not knit. The first one is the Crystal Sands Shawl by Chris Divick. This one's a fingering weight pattern. I love the look of this pattern. The sample picture is so beautiful, and I was so fixated and so obsessed with it. I had a fingering weight yarn, 2 fingering weight yarns that were like special skeins that I had about 400 yards of. So this seemed like a perfect one skein project. I bought it, I cast it on, I started knitting it, and honestly, in the pictures, I did not realize that it was all twisted rib. It's like entirely twisted rib. And it's on pretty big needles, and it looked nice, and I got probably this big on the shawl. And I was like, I can't knit this without looking at this. I have to look at it. And it's such small yarn on like 5mm needles, I think, that it just was not as engaging. Um, at the time, I had enough other projects that I couldn't knit without looking at it that I just didn't want another one. So I was like, you know what? I'm just not going to keep going with this. Maybe I will knit it at some point, but I don't think it's a fit for me right now. And I frogged the project. So I still have the yarn. I still have the pattern. It's still a possibility, and I still love it. I just wanted to be able to knit it without looking at it. So that was kind of my thought there. There's also the increases. Keeping up with the increases every single time was keeping it from being easy to not look at. So that's the first one. The second one, also an accessory, and that is the November Balaclava by Petite Knit. And that's an Aran weight pattern. I picked up at the thrift store 2 skeins of like a worsted Aran weight yarn. And it seemed like a balaclava would be a good idea for that, I think was my thought process. And I bought it. Maybe it was like I think it might have been the wrong yarn weight. Like I didn't double check. And I ended up knitting the balaclava number 1 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. So I honestly don't remember really specifically why I didn't knit this. But then I ended up designing 2 different balaclava patterns, so I just didn't need another one. I have 3 or 4 in my closet. I have this pattern. I just haven't really had a reason to knit another one. I actually have like very few hand knit hats. So all the single skeins that are of a good weight and fiber content for that have gone into like knitting a few more hats for me and my husband. I haven't been focused on balaclavas. So yeah, that one's just hanging out in my pattern library. The next one is the Everyday Bra by Naked Knit, and that is a lace weight pattern. You'll start to see a pattern here. A lot of this has to do with yarn that I thrifted, and then I had an idea and changed direction. I thrifted a bunch of lace weight yarn. One of them was 100% alpaca, and I was like, this might be a good thing to try one of these bras on because it's really soft. Even though she says you should really only use cashmere, I was like, I'm just gonna try it. And then I opened up the pattern and I saw how many stitches you have to cast on. And it was like around a elastic band. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to start that right now. I'm just not. And I have yet to get back to it. So I have a feeling I won't ever knit that. I don't know if I care enough about having a knit bra to cast on 300 plus stitches. It just felt like so much. I knew it was going to be a lot. I knew it's lace weight. I knew it was going to be a lot, and I just still could not fathom casting on that many stitches and dealing with an elastic band. I just did not feel like it. So that is why that one has not been knit. The next one I actually started and then I unraveled, and that is the Rosette cardigan by her. She's Danish or Scandinavian. She may be Swedish. I'm not sure. So her name is a little hard for me as an American to pronounce, but it's Tanja Hodne, and it's a bulky weight piece. Problem is, this was kind of like earlier in my yarn journey. It is bulky weight, but it's bulky weight with multiple strands of mohair. As you may know, multiple strands of mohair for a bulky weight is very different than just a bulky weight yarn. So I had a pretty dense bulky weight yarn, and I really like this pattern. I think it's very pretty. And I was like, ooh, I'll use this pattern with this like 100% wool dense bulky weight yarn that I have. I did not knit a swatch because I'm a silly goose. And I started knitting the pattern. I got through most of the yoke and it was just so stiff. It may have been that when I blocked it, it would have been okay, but the pattern was obviously not made for that type of yarn, and I did not switch up my needles or size or anything like that, so it was not working out. And I was also not enjoying it because I hadn't done a lot of cardigans at the time, and the knitting back and forth, and it was also in like seed stitch and cables, was kind of a lot for my middle of the road knitter brain. So I just kind of unraveled that, put the pattern to the side, and maybe at some point, if I have mohair like that lying around, I will knit it. But at the time, it was not going to happen. But it's a beautiful pattern, and I think it's so gorgeous. It's a very nice design with the radial cables. I love it. The next pattern I own but have not knit, I do plan on knitting. The only reason I haven't knit this yet is because I bought it when it was on sale with the intention of knitting it the next winter. And that is the Autumn Alpine by Caitlin Hunter or Boyland Knitworks. And it's a sport weight yarn. I have not found yarn for this yet. I have not swatched for this yet. I just really am obsessed with this pattern and I want to knit it at some point. So when it was 20% off a couple months ago, I was like, I'll just buy it. I want to knit it at some point. So I'll just throw the pattern in the stash and it'll be there when I get to it. Yeah, obsessed with that pattern. So the next one that I own but have not knit is the Denali by Brooklyn Tweed, and that's a worsted weight pattern. So much earlier on, and I'm talking like, I'm not even sure if I had finished knitting a sweater before, I decided that this pattern was the move and that I was going to knit this pattern for my boyfriend at the time, who is now my husband. And he wanted a cabled sweater. I found this cabled sweater. I really liked it. Not knowing about panels versus like knitting in the round and all that stuff. I just liked the sweater. And I went and I bought Woolies, the like yarn that's Lion brand, partially acrylic, partially wool, in a dark charcoal gray. And I was like, I'm totally going to knit this for him. At the time, also, I will note as a side note, I did not know that I was twisting my stockinette stitches. So that contributes to this whole ordeal. So it's bottom up paneled with saddle shoulders. So unbelievably complicated. I started knitting the front panel, and it took me ages. It was taking me so long. I had never done cables before, never done a paneled sweater before. Like I said, I may not have done a sweater before. I can't remember. And it was way too much for me. I spent months and months and months and months trying to work on this sweater until I finally, and I felt guilty about it because I really wanted to knit this for him and I knew he would like it and he was excited about it, but I just was never going to finish it. So I eventually unraveled it. I don't think I will ever knit this pattern because it is paneled and because it is bottom up. it's just too much. I even actually, I think I put the front panel that I was working on, I got maybe like this far on it. I put it on hold and I actually knit an entire one of the sleeves because it's in stockinette. And I was like, oh, I'll do that. That'll be easier. And even then I was like, this is not going to get finished ever. And then I recognized that my stitches were twisted and I was like, I would have to redo that whole thing. And I think that was the point that I was like, nope, not going to happen. So that is why that one has not been knit. But I own it. I own it just in case someday. Maybe I'll convert it into a in the round pattern on my own, do my own math, but probably not. The next pattern that I own but I have not knit is the Hazel Sweater by Petite Knit, and this is a worsted weight pattern. So this one I bought 2 winters ago. I really wanted a sweater pattern to work on. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go just buy some inexpensive acrylic yarn because I had no money at the time. I'm just gonna cast this on because I think it's really cute. I loved these split seams with the like longer back. So cute. I actually still don't have a single like real turtleneck hand knit sweater. I just haven't picked one of those out to knit. And I actually knit almost this entire sweater. But I had 2 issues. The first one was when I was doing, I think it's 2x2 rib, or maybe it's 3x3 rib. I had a problem with like gapping in the last like knit stitch along and it didn't look very good. I've since realized that I need to pull my stitch tighter when I transition to the purl stitch. But at the time I didn't know that and the whole thing looked like that and I was not a huge fan. But it also hurts your hands to pull that stitch a lot over and over and over again. So there's that. And for some reason, I don't know if my armholes weren't big enough or if there was an issue with the stitch count on the sleeve, but it looked so off. Like there were way too many stitches on the sleeve and I was already knitting the size small. I knit most things in the size small. So there was like not a lot of difference between the size small and the extra small as far as like sleeve stitches. So then I was like, oh, maybe I'll figure it out with the short rows and everything myself. And I think I started and I maybe did part of the sleeve. And then eventually I was like, screw it, not going to happen. And I unraveled the whole thing. I have since used that yarn for a small blanket and I'm much more content with that. I may knit this pattern at some point. I do really, really like it. I just don't know if I'd hurt my hands by doing the rib. And I'd also need a yarn for it. So we will see. I'm not sure. I have a yarn that might actually work for it, but I just don't know if I have enough. But that's a really pretty sweater. I do like it a lot. But I own it and have no finished object for it. The next piece, also a sweater, is the Marrow Sweater by Ocean Knits, and it's a super bulky pattern. So I did a test knit for Ocean Knits, and part of your compensation for test knitting was another pattern of your choice. So technically I did not buy this one. I really, really liked this pattern. It's got that scale-like look on the bottom. And I looked for yarn for a long time for this. And the thing about super bulky yarn is it's quick and it's easy and all that, but it is prohibitively expensive, in my opinion. It is unbelievably expensive. $25 a ball, even if you only need a handful, is I think so much money, especially for a beginner knitter, like which is what a lot of these super bulky patterns are oriented towards. So you've never knit before and you're going to go spend $200 on yarn. That's crazy. And I wanted it to be nice. I wanted it to be predominantly wool. So I looked at a few other options, but it just wasn't happening. And then I actually found something on sale. I started knitting it and I just didn't like how it was turning out. And honestly, I just didn't think I was going to wear it. It was really pretty. I really, really, really like the pattern. I just don't think I'm going to wear a super bulky sweater. It's so dense, and I would rather spend the time and money on something else. It's a beautiful pattern. I love it. I adore it. If I had all the money in the world, I would absolutely go knit it like right now in a pretty fun color. But I do not have all the money in the world. Therefore, it is just exists in concept. So that is why I have not knit that piece. And then my last one that I own but have not knit was once again from my early days of knitting. I had this worsted weight cotton yarn that I picked up somewhere or was given or whatever. And I was trying to find a pattern that I could use just 2 skeins for. They were also different colors, so I don't really know what I was thinking. A worsted weight summer pattern because it was cotton. And I thought, I looked through Ravelry and I found this one, the Liines Summer Top. It's really cute, but it's top down. And now I would say, oh, great, it's top down. But at the time, I was very confused by how a top down tank top like that works. Like this, for example, is top down. What you have to do is you have to essentially knit each strap and then they all get attached together. I tried, I was so confused, and I gave up. I might go back and knit it at some point, but honestly, I think there's a lot of other things in my queue that are ahead of that I would knit before trying this one again. Not that it's not beautiful, it's just, you know how it is. I bought the pattern years ago now, and I've got other focuses. So that's kind of where I'm at. Those are all the things that I haven't knit, but I own. I try to be really careful about buying patterns. I want to support designers, but I don't want to be spending money that's not going to get my use out of it, the value out of it. I want to be buying things pretty intentionally. I try the same with yarn. I don't have a crazy stash. I try to keep it not crazy. Yeah, I usually buy patterns once I already have the yarn, have potentially already swatched, and I literally am about to cast on. Like usually it's a 5 minutes before I cast on, I buy the pattern. So like I'm fully committed by the time I'm buying it. So the fact that I even have 9 is in some ways impressive, but it also makes sense. 9 out of 63 is not bad. But yeah, I'd be interested to know what patterns you own but have not knit yet. I think it's kind of telling in a way of like the way that you knit and the kind of things that you enjoy knitting in the end. Yeah, that is it for today. If you like this video, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. It really means a lot to me. And I hope you have a great day and happy knitting.